Good evening. My name is Peter Connor. I'm the director of the Barnard Center for Translation Studies, and I'm very happy to welcome you to tonight's event. It's the first event of our fall season, and it's a very special event, a very exciting event. We're particularly pleased to have such distinguished guests to speak about such a fascinating topic. Some of you may have seen the coverage in the press, and tonight we're here to hear about the process of translating the second sex and to hear about the reception by the critics and to generally discuss the matter of translation. The Barnard Translation Center was founded 2 years ago thanks to a grant from the Mellon Foundation, and its purpose is very simple. The idea is to promote translation studies on the Barnard campus and on the Morningside Heights campus and beyond, and in particular to dramatize in all kinds of ways through colloquia, panel discussions such as this one, and courses, why translation matters. And we're particularly interested here, since we're at a women's college, to show why translation matters for women and why translation by women matters in particular ways that are distinct perhaps from translations by men. And we couldn't be more blessed this evening. I'm going to introduce the moderator, and the moderator will introduce everyone else. So the moderator is Luise von Flotow, who is professor and director of the School of Translation and Interpretation at the University of Ottawa. She's a specialist on translation and gender. She has a book of that title, Translation and Gender, Translating in the Era of Feminism, published in 1997, which includes an extensive discussion of the translation of the second sex, the first translation, about which we'll be hearing a good deal tonight, I think, and which includes also discussions of the translation of the Mandarins. She's also a translator herself, so a translator scholar, and has translated the writings of Ulrike Meinhof, among others, a task she discusses in an essay to appear this month in a book, Translating Women, which she also edited. So I hope you'll all stay for the reception, and I hope you'll all enjoy the evening. We're going to leave plenty of time for questions and answers, because I know that there will be lots. And I'll hand the microphone over to Luise.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming in such large numbers. I think it's excellent to see so many people on an evening that has to do with translation and about translation. Peter did not mention that I come from Canada, and in Canada, translation is an everyday event and very much in discussion on a daily basis. Maybe that is what makes it possible to have a school of translation and interpretation in Ottawa. I'd also like to thank Peter and the Center for Translation Studies here for inviting us to come from Canada all the way to New York and spend a couple of very nice days here. I say us because the woman sitting at the far end of the table is also from Ottawa. Her name is Anna Bogic, and she wrote an MA dissertation last year on rehabilitating Howard Parsley. Those of you who know about Simone de Beauvoir and Le Deuxième Sexe know also that Howard Parsley was responsible for the first translation into English and has been much maligned over the past few years. So her MA thesis addresses exactly that, the problem of the translator being the one who is maligned, whereas we discover that many other people are involved in producing translations. Hopefully, so this is Anna Bogic at the far end. In the middle here are the two translators of the new English version of Simone de Beauvoir's Le Deuxième Sexe. On my right, first of all, Sheila Malovany Chevalier, and on her right, Constance Borde. Now, I'm not really sure how to proceed, whether you want your CVs read out now. Maybe that's a good way of going. Okay. They, because they've worked together, they also have a bio together. So Sheila Malovany Chevalier and Constance Borde both attended Douglas College Rutgers University, in the 1960s, and have been friends and working partners ever since. They have each lived in France for over 40 years, teaching literature and American civilization, and writing English grammar and other books for French speakers. In the 70s, they both studied and got degrees in linguistics, one at the University of Vincennes, that's Sheila, right here, and the other at Nanterre, that's Connie, in Paris. They were both teachers at Sciences Po, Sheila for 35 years and Constance for 22. Feminism and politics, as well as knowledge of France and its culture, led them to the translation into English of Le Deuxième Sexe by Simone de Beauvoir. Notable among their other publications have been a series of grammar books, for example, My English is French, a video series, Magic English, for Disney, to teach children English, focus on American democracy, explaining the American system of government, and several French cookbooks on American food. All along, they have been translating from French to English, social sciences, arts, and feminist writings. And Anna Bogic, I think I've said enough. She's just completed this MA about a year ago and is currently working at the French Embassy in Ottawa, Canada, as a translator. So those are the introductions. I'd like to take maybe 10 minutes to come on a little bit as a university professor of translation studies and talk a little bit about the importance of translation and retranslation, very briefly. So we're here this evening to hear about and to celebrate a new translation, the retranslation of Simone de Beauvoir's Le Deuxième Sexe. In my view, every translation is an event to celebrate. A translation creates knowledge, makes available new and different ideas, reworks the materials produced in one culture and language for another culture and language, or in this case, for the many other different English-speaking cultures. A retranslation adds a further twist to this textual profusion by offering yet another possible reading of an earlier text, a reading that is framed differently and produced in and for a different cultural moment or for a different écologie intellectuelle, you could say in French, different intellectual context. Oddly, in North America and other parts of the English-speaking world, many translations pass unnoticed, garner few reviews and even fewer prizes. In fact, sometimes when they do garner prizes, there's a scandal because a translation is often considered in the North American world as not real, original, genuine writing, but rather as a kind of a fake. Luckily, however, scandals also sell books. So that's a good point. Every scandal is worth exploiting. But really, in the English-speaking world, an evening like this is quite the exception. Tonight, translation is being taken seriously, honored, discussed, and the translators are feted and provided with a public space in which to present their work. This is most unusual. Let us enjoy a most unexpected moment of translator visibility. Translator visibility at the moment is a buzzword in translation studies. There's a famous book that was produced a few years ago called The Invisibility of the Translator, and discusses exactly that problem in the English-speaking world. So tonight we have a moment of translator visibility, or 2 hours about. So many of you will know some of the history of Beauvoir's The Second Sex in English. After it spent 30 years of relative quiet in English, a bestseller at first and then continuing to sell well enough in the version that was published in 1953, the English response suddenly became noisily critical from about the 1980s onward. It grew noisier over the next years, with numerous academic and newspaper articles condemning this or that aspect of the work. I participated in this, but always said that while it is easy to criticize a translation, it is difficult to produce one. The critics deal with short excerpts that they select to prove a particular point. The translator deals with every single word and every single punctuation mark, as well as the publishers, the editors, and their demands and time constraints. So Criticism is easy, production of translation extremely complex. In any case, the critical impetus that developed was the result of an important change in the cultural climate. Feminism had broken out. And Beauvoir, seen as a second-wave feminist, was being reclaimed by various English feminist thinkers and philosophers. And this really started in 1983 with Margaret Simon's article. These feminist thinkers and philosophers expounded on various aspects of the 1953 translation that they disagreed with, disapproved of, and in the end condemned. The most important of these aspects were unmarked cuts in the text that reduced Beauvoir's original work by about 15%. Had just disappeared and was not marked. Often in a translation, if you leave out something, you put square brackets, ... and everybody knows, the readers know that there's something been left out. These were unmarked. Another aspect that caused dismay were various mistranslations or misunderstandings that people found of the French, especially in regard to philosophical concepts that Beauvoir used and developed. I myself examined the translation of Beauvoir's references to sex on request. Somebody asked me to write an article on this. 3 things I looked at: sexualized language for expressive purposes, one way of putting swearing, swear words, discussions of women's sexuality and le deuxième sexe, and romantic sex scenes in the novels, in a few novels. And I found that all the translators, all of whom were men, Howard Parsley in 1953, Leonard Friedman in 1956, and Patrick O'Brien from 1968 onward, had produced work that differed substantially in tone, primarily, from Beauvoir's original French. Either censoring her language to make it more euphemistic and polite and cutting perverse materials. Perverse is the term used by the English-American publisher of Leonard Friedman's translation of The Mandarins. So that was the tendency in 1950s United States. Or increasing the vulgarity of Beauvoir's language and strangely skewing it through the use of very crude, male-focused terms. And this was the translator Patrick O'Brien in late 1960s, Carnaby Street, England, when things were really moving. So, the barrage of criticism over these past 30 years finally led to the retranslation we're here to talk about this evening, a labor that took several years and has earned the translators both visibility already and controversy, and hopefully a certain amount of cash. It's very important, and it's not a given in translation. As was to be expected, the responses to the translation have been coming in fast and strong, creating more and more discussion, and hopefully also selling books like scandals do. Discussion is good. A focus on the labor and importance of translation is also good. And so is the truth that this reveals, and that is that there is no one final version of any text. There are approaches to text, there are interpretations of text, there are versions of texts. No translation provides the true version of another text or guarantees direct access to the words and the thought of a foreign writer. Not even Le Deuxième Sexe in French is the same book in French to every reader who reads it in French. Two recent and somewhat feminist approaches to translation theories have examined this capacity of texts and translations to re-signify and constantly change in meaning and in meaningfulness. And I'd like to take just a moment to present them here as food for thought as we move into this evening. After all, translation theory gets as little exposure to the general public as translations do, so I'm going to take about 2 minutes to do this.